Hey guys, welcome back. Fishing 101 The Basics. Today it's going to be the Great Snap Controversy. Alright, the Great Snap Controversy. And I'm not talking about somebody going into the 7-Eleven and picking up some ho-hos and a big gulp and using a snap card. Well, I suppose that could be a little controversial. No, I'm talking about the lowly snap. Something that small can be so controversial as whether you should use it or not. I'll show you that. And we've got two other small items. That's what we're going to cover today, but these are pretty essential items you're going to want in your tackle box. Now, what is a snap? Well, it's Basics 101. So let's get down. I have a snap. I have a swivel. A big one, but I got a swivel so you can see it a little easier. And I also have, I got a big one here. I have a snap swivel. Swivel and a snap put together. They all have different things. They can be used in different places. Let's start out with a swivel. A swivel is basically designed, you can tie a line on either end and they'll spin around so it won't kink up your fishing line. How is it used? Well, here's one example. Let's say you're bass fishing, you got a worm hook on, you want to wait but you don't want to put it up by the hook. This is what they will call a Carolina rig. I've got a weight and it'll slide back and forth on the line. I've got a swivel that stops it. And then I've got a hook and I might put my plastic worm on that. Now the weight will sink at the bottom and my worm will float up just a little. It won't get down in the stuff. And with the weight sliding the way it does, if a bass picks up an worm and starts to pull, he won't be pulling all the weight at the same time. So if you're bass fishing, that's a Carolina rig. Now, let's take that exact same scenario, just like this one. Let's put a big old weight on here. We might put a ½ ounce, we could put an ounce, it depending on how you're fishing. Let's say you're going for catfish. You can do the same thing. This weight goes on just the same way. It'll slide back and forth. I've seen people using the same weight for carp. Again, the weight goes on, it'll slide back and forth. You got a leader of about 12 to 15 inches in the hook. Now you can bait it up for catfish or put corn or dough balls for carp, and as they start pulling away the bait, they won't feel the weight because it slides back and forth. So that's just some examples of where a swivel works out, where you can use a swivel. And what about a snap swivel? Now I've got a swivel and a snap both. I got, I guess, two locations where I use it. Now, I would say people, even with catfish sometimes, I've seen these, this one has to be a huge one that's used on throw lines for catfish, because catfish will sometimes, you'll have it offline, they'll start spinning around so it twists up the line. I use it in two places for lures. Of course, I use it with a lot smaller version. Here is a basic inline lure, like a Mepps. Sometimes they'll have the hair tails. This has got a rubber tail, but it's got your blade that spins around. Sometimes that blade can get hung up and it'll start the whole lure turning and turning. And when it does that, it kinks up your fishing line that's going back into your reel and messes the line up. But if you have a snap swivel on the end, if this starts to roll instead of the blade spinning, it won't mess up your fishing line. Another big location for that, bass fishing with a whopper plopper. Here the tail spins. But whopper ploppers are pretty notorious. You get a little bit of vegetation in there and the whole whopper plopper starts turning. And I'll tell you what, about 2 casts with that turning and you can forget your fishing line going back to reel. It's all kinked up, it's all messed up. Again, here's a spot you could use a snap swivel, snap it on. In case this starts turning, it won't mess up your line. Now, here's what I do with my whopper ploppers. We have a split ring. There's a split ring on the nose. I will take that split ring and I'll attach a swivel. A small one, much smaller of course, but I'll attach a swivel and I put one on every one of my whopper ploppers. The reason I do that is now I've already got the swivel in place. I don't have to worry about having this hooked onto a rod. If I want to tie direct onto that swivel, I can tie direct on. If I want to use the controversial snap to attach it, I can do that. It just hooks into the swivel. So I take every whopper plopper I get. Before I take them out and put them in a tackle box, I make sure they got a split ring. If they don't have one, I'll put one on. And once the split ring's on, I'll put a swivel on every one of them. Now I don't have to worry about anything on my rod and reel. Every lure is set and ready to go with a swivel so it can't mess up my fishing line. All right, let's get into the controversial one, the snap. Now, the snaps, a lot of people, very small, very little, and basically it's just tied on the end of the fishing line, so you can take the snap, snap it onto a lure, and you don't have to tie on the lure every time. Now, it's controversial because there are some people who will tell you, I never use a snap. Anybody who uses a snap is just too lazy to tie it on. Let's remember that line, they're too lazy. We're going to come back to that in just a minute. A lot of people will tell you the snap will affect the lure. We'll have this lure and I'll put a snap on it and it's going to move differently. You know, that's possible, but I have a hard time believing there are two bass down there waiting and this lure is going by and one bass nudges the other and said, whoa, that one's moving a little funny. I wouldn't touch it. I don't buy that. What I will buy is a snap will have you changing lures more often when something isn't biting. A snap is something you get to the lake and you fished a different lake yesterday or last week. And now you come to this lake and it's totally different. It was clear water, now it's dirty water. It was morning, now it's evening. You got to change. Hey, you grab the snap, you put on a different lure. But the guy that has ties on all the time, if I had $1 for every time I heard, I think I'll just fish with this because I'm too lazy to tie on something different. Why? If you're there to fish and catch fish, you want to use the lure that's best suited to fish that day. I like a snap. I don't think it's going to hurt the movement of the lure that much. And I think I will change lures far faster than somebody that has to tie one on every time. But if I'm throwing this thing and it's not catching fish in a little bit, it's going off, and I have to get the hooks on my fingers. Oh, there we go. This one's going on. And if that one's not catching fish, that one's going on. I'm going to be changing and changing until I find what works. And I find I will change more often with a snap because it's so much easier to change lures. Now, do you use a snap everywhere? No. I will use a snap on crankbaits. I will use a snap on chatterbaits. On spinners, I'll use a snap. I will not use a snap on a plastic worm or a jig or something like that. Especially with a plastic worm, let's take a worm hook. Here's a basic worm hook, and I'm going to be fishing this. It could be weighted, it could be not, but it's my basic worm hook. I don't need a snap for this. And the reason I don't is I'm fishing a 6-inch plastic worm and they're not biting. So I take it off and I put on a 10-inch green worm and they're not biting. And I take it off and I put on a brush hog or I put on some other kind of a creature bait until I find out what they're biting on. I can change over and over and over again what I'm throwing, but I never have to untie the hook. Because of that, there's no need to use a snap. So all my soft plastics, all that type of stuff, I tie on, no snap. But I will use a snap when I'm dealing with crankbaits, chatterbaits, something like that. I'll switch off more often on my lures. I think it pays off. That's my opinion. And the guy that says he'd never use one of these and doesn't have one in his tackle box will tell you I'm wrong. And that's why that little thing is so controversial. All right, that's 3 things we're just covering for today. They're real little, but they're very important. So get yourself a packet of snaps, some swivels, and some snap swivels, and that'll cover you in a lot of instances. Thanks for sticking with me. Subscribe to the channel if you would. Hope to see you again real soon.